The first warning came as a sound rather than an alarm. A deep, grinding resonance that traveled through 600 meters of compacted coaltite ore and reached Jovel Tesserin's boots before it reached his ears. He was standing at the intersection of Tunnel D7 and the southern ventilation shaft when the ceiling behind him simply ceased to exist. 200 tons of fractured rock fell in less than 3 seconds. The pressure wave knocked Jovel sideways into the ore cart rail, and the lights died in the same breath. Absolute darkness. Absolute silence, except for the settling of broken stone and the ragged breathing of 47 Drevani miners who had just been sealed inside the planet. Jovel pulled himself upright using the rail. His hard hat lamp flickered, caught, held. The pale beam cut through a wall of gray dust, illuminating nothing but suspended particles, and beyond them, the new face of solid rubble where the main egress tunnel had been 2 seconds ago. "Count off," he said. His voice sounded thin against the settling rock. "Sound your names. Start with the crews nearest D7 and work outward." Names came back through the darkness. Frightened voices. Calm ones. A few that cracked on the first syllable and steadied on the second. The Drevani were not a species built for enclosed spaces. Their deep-set compound eyes were designed for the amber skies of their homeworld, their breathing spiracles optimized for low-pressure atmospheres rich in volatile trace gases. Being buried alive was not merely dangerous for them. It was the architectural opposite of everything their biology demanded. 47 voices. Jovel counted each one and locked the number in his chest like a stone he would carry until the number changed, or until it didn't need to be carried anymore. 47 people who were his responsibility because he had designed this mine. Because the Terran coalition of engineers had sent him here 8 months ago to oversee the coaltite extraction that would fuel the Drevani's new orbital tether. Because he was the only human below the collapse, and because the Drevani foreman, Gurath Kal, was already moving through the dusty dark toward him with those enormous amber compound eyes reflecting Jovel's headlamp in a dozen fractured facets. "Tesserin," Gurath's voice came low and controlled. "The main shaft is gone." "I know. The ventilation runs." "We'll check, but the sound profile tells me the collapse extended at least 40 meters laterally. Anything connected to the main shaft in that radius is compromised." Gurath absorbed this without visible reaction. The Drevani had a way of going perfectly still when they were processing information, a predator's patience, inherited from ancestors who had hunted by ambush in the ore fields of their continental shelves. His spiracles sealed flat against his neck for a moment, then opened again. "How long do we have?" Jovel checked his wrist readout. The environmental data was still transmitting from the local sensors embedded in the tunnel walls, a small mercy. Air recyclers, offline. Ventilation shaft, blocked at the 40-meter mark. Passive oxygen supply from the lower geological vents, marginal and declining. Carbon dioxide buildup rate at current population density, critical threshold in 19 hours. 19 hours, Jovel said. At current consumption rates. If we minimize activity, maybe 20. If everyone panics and starts hyperventilating, maybe 14. Gurath's spiracles flared once, the Drevani equivalent of a sharp breath. And the surface. No one above knows we're alive. The collapse will have disrupted the local comm relays. But the seismic array, Jovel paused, organizing the information. The surface seismic array is hardwired to the Terran Coalition's mining safety network. It registered this event within seconds. That signal went straight to Kestrel Station, without needing our local comms. Kestrel Station is far. 11 hours at maximum transit. Jovel met his gaze in the headlamp light. That leaves 8 hours of margin, tight, but possible. Possible, Gurath repeated. The word sat between them like a stone too heavy to move, but too important to step over. "Listen to me," Jovel said, raising his voice so it carried down the remaining 300 meters of accessible tunnel. His Dravani was imperfect. He'd learned it on site over 8 months. The guttural consonants never quite right against his human palate, but every miner down here understood him. The collapse sealed the main shaft. Ventilation is compromised. We have breathable air for approximately 19 hours at current consumption rates. I need every non-essential light off. I need movement minimized. And I need the 3 crew chiefs up here at D7 Junction in 2 minutes. The crew chiefs materialized from the darkness like ghosts assembling. Tessic, the youngest, barely a decade past his second molt, his chitin stress bale and his compound eyes too wide. Barath, the oldest, whose spiracles barely fluttered because she had been underground for 40 years and had decided long ago that panic was beneath her. And Kas, the mid-career specialist whose section had been closest to the collapse face, and whose crew of 9 had heard the ceiling coming down in the tunnel directly behind them. Jovel assigned them tasks. Tessic, inventory the D7 emergency cache. Barath, organize work rotations to clear the secondary ventilation access. Kas, casualty assessment, anyone injured, anyone in shock, anyone whose spiracles were already showing constriction. Keep everyone accounted for, keep everyone working. The first hour was productive in the way that terror channeled into labor often is. The Dravani crews, organized by their chiefs into rotating shifts, began methodically clearing the secondary ventilation access point. The physical effort distributed oxygen demand across the group rather than concentrating it in idle bodies, and it kept the young miners' hands too busy for their minds to spiral. Jovel moved between the groups, checking vital signs where he could, monitoring CO2 levels on his readout, keeping his voice calm and his instructions clear. He counted, always counting, 47 breathing rates, 47 headlamp positions, 47 lives that he was holding in his awareness like a juggler keeps plates in the air, not by watching anyone but by attending to the whole pattern. The inventory came back from Tessic. 14 supplemental oxygen canisters, each rated for 90 minutes of extension in a space this size. 100 liters of potable water in sealed containers. 3 trauma kits designed for Dravani physiology, spherical irrigators, chitin crack sealant, hypothermic membrane patches. 1 communications relay beacon rated for surface transmission, through up to 80 meters of standard geological medium. The collapse was 600 meters deep. The beacon was useless for reaching the surface. Mount it anyway, Jovel said. Highest accessible point, the ventilation shaft stub. Any rescue team boring down will hit the signal long before they hit us. It's a homing beacon, not a phone call. By hour 3, the ventilation clearing had hit solid caprock. The secondary access was sealed just as thoroughly as the primary. The collapse had been catastrophic and systemic, not localized. Jovel stood at the face of the rock with his palm flat against it and felt nothing. No vibration from above. No drill resonance. No indication that anyone on the surface was boring toward them. The Dravani felt the absence too. It moved through the group like a cold draft. Jovel saw it in the way the younger miners stopped working and began looking at the ceiling. In the way Tessic's crew started whispering in the rapid, clicking dialect that Jovel's 8 months of language study couldn't parse. He found Gurath at the D7 junction, standing motionless beside the ore cart that held the useless beacon. "The young crew chief," Gurath said without preamble. "Tessic. He is telling the others that no one is coming." What specifically is he telling them? That the Dravani Authority has no deep rescue equipment, that the human coalition installation is too far, that we are already dead and simply waiting to discover it. Gurath's spiracles flared the held breath reflex. Is he wrong? He's wrong about the conclusion. Get me in front of all 47. They gathered in the widest section of accessible tunnel, a junction where 3 ore seams converged, and the ceiling was high enough for even the tallest Dravani to stand fully upright. Jovel stood on the ore cart and let his headlamp sweep across them in a slow arc. 47 faces, some calm with the hard-won control of veterans, some blank with the particular stillness of a mind refusing to process what it already knows. The young ones barely past their second molt, clustered together in the back, their chitin pale with stress leaching, their spiracles cycling too fast. "I'm going to tell you what I know," Jovel said. "Not what I hope, not what I want to be true, what I know as an engineer who helped build the safety systems that monitor this mine." He held up his wrist unit so the dim glow of its display was visible. "Fact, the surface seismic array recorded this collapse within seconds of occurrence. I installed that array myself. It is hardwired to the Terran Coalition's mining safety network, not dependent on our local comms, which are down." The moment the array registered the event, an automated alert was transmitted to the Rapid Response Division at Kestrel Station. That is not hope. That is engineering. He let the silence hold for 2 seconds, long enough for the information to settle. "Fact, the Rapid Response Division maintains a standing deployment package for subterranean collapse events. 2 heavy-bore drilling rigs, a geological survey shuttle with ground-penetrating sonar, medical teams, structural engineers, atmospheric remediation equipment. The package is maintained in launch-ready condition, assembled, staged at the deployment bay, preloaded onto a transport ship that is always fueled and always crewed. It is not built when the call comes. It is already built." Another pause. Tessik's voice came from the middle of the crowd, tight, controlled, but with an edge that wanted to become panic. "Kestrel Station is 11 hours from this planet at maximum transit. We have 19 hours of air, 8 hours of margin. 1 delay, 1 navigation correction, 1 equipment malfunction, 1 wrong bore path, and we die." "You're right about the arithmetic," Jovel said. He did not dismiss the concern. He answered it. "Now let me tell you what the arithmetic doesn't account for. The Terran Coalition does not send 1 team boring from 1 direction. Standard protocol for a collapse deeper than 300 meters is dual approach extraction. 1 team bores from the surface downward. A second team enters from any accessible lateral geological formation and bores horizontally or upward toward the same target. The goal is to cut the distance for each team so that neither has to go the full 600 meters. He watched the implication land on 47 faces. 1 team, 600 meters from above at 40 meters per hour, 15 hours. 2 teams from different directions, 300 meters each, 7.5 hours. Plus transit, survey, setup. Call it 14 hours total. 14 hours is the realistic estimate, Jovel said. That leaves 5 hours of margin, not 8, not 2, 5. Solid margin, manageable, but only if we are intelligent about the air between now and then." A murmur moved through the gathered miners. Not hope exactly. The Dravani were not an optimistic species by cultural temperament, their history having taught them that hope uncoupled from evidence was merely another way to die poorly. But something had shifted. The arithmetic of certain death had been replaced by the arithmetic of endurance. And endurance was something the Dravani had practiced for 3 centuries underground. Hour 4 brought the first medical situation. One of the oldest miners, a female named Tessie, 60-year veteran of the coaltite seams, began showing signs of spherical constriction. Her breathing membranes were narrowing in response to the declining atmospheric quality, which reduced her oxygen intake, which made the constriction worse in a feedback loop that could turn lethal in hours if unchecked. Jovel broke open the first trauma kit and found the spherical irrigator, a device he'd been trained on during orientation but never used. Gurath talked him through it. Jovel's hands were steady as he applied the irrigation fluid to Thessie's neck membranes, holding the device at the angle Gurath specified, working slowly until the spiracles relaxed and her breathing eased. The old miner's compound eyes focused on Jovel's face throughout the procedure, studying him with the piercing attention of someone cataloging a fact they intended to remember. "Human hands," Tessie rasped when it was done, "warm." By hour 6, The temperature had begun to drop. The deep geological vents that normally provided passive heating had been partially disrupted by the collapse, and the ambient warmth that the Drevani miners relied on was bleeding away into the surrounding rock mass. Jovel organized the miners into body heat clusters, groups of 8, rotated every 30 minutes so no individual exhausted their thermal reserves. The Drevani's chitin plates were moderate insulators, but their joints and spherical membranes were vulnerable. 2 of the younger miners were showing early signs of hypothermic spherical constriction, the same feedback loop that had hit Thessie, but triggered by cold rather than air quality. Jovel gave them his jacket first, then his thermal underlayer. A human could endure cold better than a Drevani. His metabolic furnace burned hotter, his skin sealed rather than spiracled. His body had evolved on a world where winter meant surviving temperatures that would kill most galactic species in hours. He sat in his undershirt in the 6-degree air and controlled his shivering by force of will and breathing technique. The cold was unpleasant but not dangerous. Not yet. Not for a human. Gurath watched him strip his clothing off piece by piece and hand it to miners whose biology couldn't cope. The foreman said nothing, but his compound eyes tracked Jovel differently after that, the assessment shifting, the conclusion being revised in real time. Hour 8. The CO2 readout crossed the first advisory threshold, not dangerous yet but trending. Jovel cracked the first supplemental oxygen canister and mounted it at the tunnel's highest point, letting the denser carbon dioxide settle below and the fresh oxygen displace it from above. Elementary atmospheric stratification. He'd learned it in a 3-day course on mine safety that the coalition required for all deployed engineers. 3 days of theory. Now the theory was keeping 47 people alive. Hour 9. Tessic found him alone at the D7 junction, running calculations on his wrist unit by the dim glow of its failing display. The young crew chief's chitin was pale as chalk, his spiracles cycling in the rapid pattern that meant his body was working overtime to extract oxygen from thinning air. "Do you actually believe they're coming?" Tessic asked. No challenge in it now. Just the raw question of a young man who needed to know whether to keep enduring or to begin accepting. Jovel looked up. "I worked at Kestrel for 2 years before this posting. I've seen the Rapid Response Bay. The ship is called the Ironside Ridge. It sits in berth 7 with a full crew roster rotating through standby shifts, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The boring rigs are mounted in the cargo hold in deployment configuration. The medical teams run drill exercises every 9 days. I have personally seen them go from cold alert to full deployment in under 3 hours. He held Tessic's gaze. They're not coming because they choose to. They're coming because that's what the system does when it receives a seismic alert from a supervised mine. It activates. It has no off switch for inconvenient distances. Tessic was silent for a long moment, then, and the dual approach. From the side. If there's accessible lateral geology within operational range, and I believe there is, because I surveyed this region's cavern systems during the planning phase, they'll identify it from orbit with ground-penetrating sonar and send a second team. That's doctrine, not choice. The system doesn't choose to send 2 teams. It sends 2 teams because single-bore failure rates in deep collapses are 16%, and the coalition considers 16% unacceptable. Unacceptable, Tessic repeated. For any species, under any contract terms, including when the host government has declined the comprehensive package. Jovel watched that register. The automated alert doesn't check insurance status. It checks whether people are alive below the collapse. Everything else is paperwork that gets sorted after the breathing starts again. At hour 11, the beacon they had mounted in the ventilation stub began to ping. A return signal, faint, barely above the noise floor but regular and artificial. Something above was sending ranging pulses through the rock, looking for them, mapping the geology between the surface and the trapped miners. Ground-penetrating sonar, Jovel said. He was too exhausted to control the expression on his face, so he let it happen, let the relief show for one unguarded moment before pulling his engineer's comm back over it. They're mapping the bore path. The news traveled through the tunnels at the speed of whispered hope. 47 miners knew within 2 minutes. The young ones pressed their palms against the ceiling as if they could feel the sonar pulses through 600 meters of stone. They couldn't, but the gesture was instinct, reaching toward the thing reaching toward them. What Jovel could not see, what he could only know based on protocol and doctrine, and 2 years of watching the Rapid Response Division run drills, was what was happening 600 kilometers above their heads. The Ironside Ridge had dropped out of transit with a deceleration burn that painted the orbital insertion corridor in blue-white. Launched from Kestrel 47 minutes after the automated alert, well inside the 3-hour window that Command considered maximum acceptable mobilization time. Commander Ilara Vasic had read her deployment brief during the transit burn, absorbing the geology, the mine layout, the population estimate, the atmospheric timeline. 2 decisions made before the ship cleared the outer system markers. First, dual approach confirmed surface bore plus lateral entry through the natural cavern system that the mine's own geological survey had identified at 400 meters depth, accessible from an erosion 0.3 kilometers east. Second, deploy the Blind Mole, the smaller, faster geological survey ship that carried horizontal thermal cutting equipment, on a separate atmospheric descent to reach the eastern cavern access, while the Ironside Ridge handled the surface bore. Within 90 minutes of orbital insertion, Vasic's forward team had the first drilling platform anchored and spinning on the surface directly above the trapped miners. A military-grade Terran bore head, tungsten carbide teeth spinning at 12,000 RPM, integrated debris evacuation, structural reinforcement rings deposited as it descended. It ate rock without urgency and without pause, 40 meters per hour through coal-type-bearing caprock. The second drilling platform was positioned 200 meters south-southeast, aligned with a fault line that the sonar had identified as potentially faster going. 2 bore heads converging from different surface positions toward the same target depth. Redundancy. If one hit unexpected density or encountered a void that required bypass, the other might break through first. 3 kilometers east, the Blind Mole team descended into the cavern system. 6 engineers in thermal gear, carrying the horizontal cutting array in modular sections. The caverns were navigable, barely. Low ceilings, razor formations, one belly crawl gap where every piece of equipment had to be broken down and passed through by hand. They made the 400-meter depth in 3 hours and set up the thermal cutter aimed at the bearing their sonar had mapped. Below the collapse, Jovel felt the first bore vibration at hour 13. It came from above, a rhythmic pulse, not geological, not settling, mechanical, regular. The heartbeat of a drill head grinding through a mountain to reach them. He pressed his palm to the ceiling and closed his eyes, counting the pulses, estimating depth by vibration attenuation through the rock medium. 300 meters above us, moving at 35 to 40 per hour. He opened his eyes. 7 to 8 hours at current rate. Gurath's spiracles fluttered. We have approximately 9 hours of air remaining with careful management. Then we manage carefully. Jovel cracked another oxygen canister, number 5 of 14. One every 2 hours now, maintaining the CO2 gradient, keeping the air breathable in the inhabited section even as it deteriorated in the sealed tunnels beyond. But at hour 14, a second vibration arrived. This one came from the east wall. Jovel stood so fast he cracked his head on a support beam. He barely registered the pain. He crossed to the eastern face, the dead end where the ore seam had petered out weeks ago, and pressed both palms flat against the stone. There, a different frequency, not the heavy thrum of mechanical boring, something higher pitched, more rapid, the hiss pulse of thermal cutting, horizontal approach, closer than the surface team. Second team, Jovel said. He turned to face Gurath. Coming from the east, horizontal approach, they found a lateral access point. They're cutting toward us from the side. Gurath stared at the wall, then at Jovel, then back at the wall. Two teams, he said. The words came out in the low register that meant they carried weight beyond their literal meaning. Jovel estimated the vibration pattern suggested 80 to 100 meters distance. At thermal cutting rates through this specific geology, 4 to 5 hours, they had 9 hours of air. The margin had just tripled. He turned to the gathered miners. Two rescue teams, one from above, one from the east, running simultaneously. The eastern team is closer, estimated breakthrough in 4 to 5 hours. Surface team in 7 to 8. We have margin we didn't expect. We have redundancy. Breathe easy. He paused. That is an order. The sound that moved through the group was something Jovel would carry for the rest of his life. Not a cheer. Dravani didn't cheer. It was a collective settling, a synchronization of spiracles into steady rhythm, a relaxation of chitin plates that had been clenched for 14 hours, a sound like 47 bodies simultaneously remembering how to exhale without rationing the breath. One of the youngest miners, barely second mole, made a sound from somewhere below her larynx that Jovel had no translation for, a resonance of relief so deep it was almost indistinguishable from grief. Gurath put his hand on the young miner's shoulder plate. They sent two teams, he said quietly, not to Jovel, to the dark, to the mountain that had tried to keep them. The hours after that were hard in a different way, the hard of waiting when you know the end is coming, but cannot make it come faster. Hour 15 brought a power cell failure in Jovel's wrist unit that cost them CO2 monitoring for 40 agonizing minutes, while he repaired it with a stripped wire and a safety pin from one of the trauma kits. Hour 16 brought a secondary collapse, small, 300 meters back in an unoccupied section, but the sound of falling rock triggered a cascade of primal fear in miners who had been controlling that fear through will alone for 16 hours. 3 of the young ones began hyperventilating. Jovel and Barath moved between them with slow hands and steady voices, coaching spherical rhythm until the breathing normalized. Hour 17, the thermal cutter became audible without pressing your ear to the wall, a faint hiss pop, like summer lightning heard from under a blanket. The miners nearest the east face could feel the temperature differential, the rock warming degree by degree as plasma burned through it from the other side. Life, burning its way toward them. Jovel staged everyone away from the hot wall. The thermal array would breach with significant radiant energy flash burn risk within 10 meters. He posted Koss and Tessic as safety wardens at the marked distance. No one passes the line until the breach is complete and the heat dissipates. The miners accepted the restriction without argument. They could afford patience now. Patience was no longer the same thing as despair. Hour 18. The vertical bore above had reached 400 meters. Both rescue teams audible simultaneously. The heavy thrum from above, the hissing crack from the east. 2 heartbeats converging. The mountain caught between them, being consumed from both directions at once. The air was thin. Not dangerously thin, Jovel had cracked canisters 10 and 11 in the past 2 hours, but thin enough that the older Dravani were dizzy when they stood, and the younger one's spiracles were working visibly harder. Jovel's own head felt packed with cotton, his thoughts moving through a medium that wanted to slow them down. 3 canisters remaining. 4 hours of need before the eastern team broke through. The math still worked. He held to the math like a railing in the dark. At hour 18 and 40 minutes, the eastern wall began to glow. A dull red circle, approximately 1 meter in diameter, appeared in the dead-end face. The glow brightened orange, then yellow at the edges, white-hot at the center. Temperature in the tunnel rose 5 degrees in 2 minutes. The rock face wept thin streams of liquefied mineral running down like molten tears. Everyone back, minimum 20 meters. Cover your spiracles, thermal pulse on breach. 47 miners pressed backward, chitin clicking, spiracles sealed with palms or torn cloth. Jovel stayed at 15 meters, crouched behind an overturned ore cart. He needed to see it, needed to be the first face the rescue team saw when they came through. The glow intensified to white. The center of the circle pulsed. Then, not with explosion but with mechanical precision, pneumatic bolts fired from the other side, and a circular slab of superheated rock pushed inward and fell to the tunnel floor in a single piece, sizzling against the damp stone. Behind it, a 1-meter passage, still radiating heat, lit from within by the clean white glow of Terran worklights. And through that passage, after a 10-second pause for thermal clearance, a figure, human, medium height, bright orange thermal suit, helmet visor raised, a woman in her mid-40s with a calm face and a portable atmospheric analyzer in one hand. She swept the analyzer across the tunnel air, read the display. Looked up and found Jovel standing in his undershirt, rock dust in his hair, 18 hours of controlled endurance behind his eyes. Atmospheric levels survivable but declining. I'm Engineer Specialist Navarro, Terran Rapid Response Division. We're running forced air feed through the passage behind me, clean oxygen flooding this space in 90 seconds. She tilted her head. Population: 48, 47 Drevani, 1 human. Navarro nodded, not surprised, merely confirming what her data already indicated. She touched her comm piece. Lateral team to surface command. Breach confirmed. 48 souls, air declining, all ambulatory except 2 with spherical damage. Forced air deploying now. Medical assessment in 10 minutes. Evacuate laterally, critical first, then groups of 6. Behind her, more figures materialized in the passage. 2 engineers rigging the air feed apparatus. A medic with a cross-species trauma pack. The passage was narrow, single file, but it was open. It connected to the surface. It was the end of being buried. Jovel felt the forced air hit. A wave of clean, oxygen-rich atmosphere pouring through the breach like water released from a dam. Cool and sweet, and so profoundly different from what they'd been breathing that several miners gasped involuntarily, their spiracles opening wide to drink it in. He turned back to the 47. Some were moving forward already, drawn toward the light in the passage. Others stood frozen with compound eyes wider than Jovel had ever seen on a Drevani face, the particular expression of a creature that had been ready to die, and now had to readjust to the fact of continuing to live. Gurath stepped forward. His chitin plates caught the worklight from the breach, reflecting it in blue-gray planes that looked almost polished after 18 hours of dust. He studied the opening, the humans beyond it, the calm efficiency of their deployment. Then he looked up at the ceiling, where the vertical bore team's vibration was still steady, still descending, 2 hours from a breakthrough they no longer needed for rescue. 2 teams, Gurath said, and the one above is still coming. They won't stop until they break through. The second access point is needed for structural assessment. Assessment, Gurath seemed to taste the word. Your people are still digging because the work isn't finished, not because we're still in danger. That's correct. The evacuation took 90 minutes. Critical cases first, Thessie and 1 younger miner whose spiracles had constricted badly in the final hours, on stretchers, carried through the 180-meter lateral passage by Terran medics who navigated the narrow bore with practiced economy. Then the youngest miners. Then the rest, in groups of 6, with rest stops at marked intervals where the air feed was richest. Jovel was last. He managed the flow from inside, ensuring no panic in the passage, ensuring the air feed stayed operational, ensuring the older miners with compromised breathing got the supplemental oxygen masks that Navarro's team passed back through the line. Engineer's job: stay until the job is done. then leave. When he emerged into daylight, the amber sky of the Dravani homeworld spread above him like a benediction. He had to shield his eyes against brightness so absolute that it felt like a physical weight. 19 hours of darkness, and then this. What he saw beyond the cavern mouth stopped his thoughts for a full 3 seconds. A field hospital, 3 medical tents in clean white deployment configuration, 2 surgical units with independent atmospheric control, calibrated for Dravani physiology, the atmospheric mix adjusted for spherical-damaged patients, 28 Terran medical personnel in cross-species triage gear, 4 atmospheric adjustment chambers for miners whose breathing membranes needed gradual repressurization. And beyond the field hospital, the Ironside Ridge's ground camp, supply containers stacked in ordered rows, engineering vehicles on standby, communication arrays with dishes pointed at the orbital relay, a mess facility already operational, already serving warm protein broth calibrated to Dravani nutritional requirements, ready before the first miner emerged. 314 human beings had deployed to this planet in less than 12 hours. For 47 miners who were not human, who had not asked for this scale of response, whose government had specifically declined the comprehensive rescue insurance package, whose planetary authority had not even been notified yet because the Terran Coalition's automated system had activated and deployed before anyone on the Dravani side had thought to make a diplomatic call. Commander Vasek was waiting at the cavern mouth, compact, gray-haired, with a face that suggested she had overseen exactly this kind of operation before and found it neither remarkable nor tedious. She extended a thermal blanket and a water container. 48 confirmed, she said. 2 critical stable, the rest ambulatory with minor spherical stress. Your vitals, she glanced at his bare arms, the undershirt, the shivering he'd been controlling for 14 hours. You distributed your thermal gear. They needed it more than I did. Something shifted behind Vasek's eyes, a recognition so brief it barely existed before she returned to operational mode. Vertical bore team is at 500 meters, estimated breach in 2 hours. Structural survey will begin immediately on breakthrough. The Dravani Planetary Authority was notified 40 minutes ago, representative en route, estimated arrival 6 hours. 6 hours. The Terran Coalition had deployed 300 people, bored through a mountain from 2 directions, extracted 48 miners, built a field hospital, and begun geological remediation. All before the Dravani's own government got someone on a transport. Jovel found Gurath at the field hospital 30 minutes later. The foreman was seated on a medical cot, a Terran physician running a spherical assessment wand along his breathing membranes, with the gentle precision of someone who had trained specifically for this species' anatomy. Gurath's chitin had regained its proper blue-gray luster under the medical lights. His compound eyes were clear and focused. "Everyone out," Gurath said. "Everyone out." The foreman looked through the open tent flap at the ordered sprawl of the Terran ground camp. Supply containers, drilling rigs powering down, medical personnel moving between patients with unhurried competence. 300 humans conducting the aftermath of a rescue, with the quiet efficiency of people doing exactly what they'd prepared to do. "I have been a foreman for 22 years, Gurath said. When there is a deep collapse on a Dravani site, a true collapse, not a partial, our protocol is to evacuate what we can reach and seal what we cannot. That is the training. That is what the Planetary Authority certified me to do. Seal what you cannot reach." His spiracles flared. "Accept the number." "We don't accept the number," Jovel said, not loudly, not as a boast, as a statement of engineering fact. "No." Gurath turned those amber compound eyes, dozens of facets, fully on the human engineer who had kept 47 Dravani miners alive for 19 hours in a dead mine, by rationing canisters and giving away his clothes. "You bring 300 people and dig through a mountain from 2 directions simultaneously, because you refused to accept the number. The physician finished and moved on. Gurath sat with the knowledge for a moment. The Drevani mining industry has operated for 300 years. We have never had deep collapse rescue capability. Not once. Not for ourselves, not for anyone. Your species has been spacefaring for how long? About 400 years. And you built this capability for everyone, including species that declined to pay for it. Jovel said nothing. There wasn't a response that wouldn't sound like pride, and pride was wrong for this moment. So he stood quiet and let the fact exist without commentary. Gurath made the sound, the one Jovel had heard the young miner make at hour 14, that low resonance from below the larynx, from somewhere Drevani language didn't reach. The sound of recognition at a depth where words were inadequate. The two vibrations, Gurath said, one from above, one from the side, I will remember them for the rest of my life. Not because they meant rescue, because they meant this is what you are, not what you chose in a moment of crisis, what you built, what you maintain, what you deploy without asking whether the contract covers it. He closed his compound eyes, opened them. This is the thing humans made, and you made it for everyone. Jovel stood in the amber light of a sun that was not his, on a world that was not his, wrapped in a thermal blanket because he had given his warmth to people whose biology could not endure what his could. Around him, 314 of his species went about the business of having just done exactly what they'd trained to do. No celebration, no astonishment, professionals finishing a deployment. He said the truest thing the engineer in him knew. The system doesn't check whose miners they are, it just responds. Yes, Gurath said. That is exactly what I am telling you. The amber sun tracked across the afternoon sky. Below the surface, the vertical bore team was still descending, 2 hours from a breakthrough that was no longer needed for rescue, but would be needed for assessment, for remediation, for rebuilding. The system did not stop when the crisis ended. It kept working. It kept boring through 600 meters of mountain because the job included making sure this never happened again. The report Commander Vasek filed that evening was 11 pages long. Seismic event documentation, automated alert timeline, mobilization sequence, dual approach bore strategy, breach, evacuation, medical outcomes, 48 extracted, 0 fatalities, 2 critical now stable, 46 ambulatory. Under lessons learned, she wrote one line, dual bore approach validated, recommend protocol update, lateral access survey as first response priority for all deep collapse events in non-Terran geological formations. No commentary on meaning. No reflection on what it demonstrated about a species that built rescue infrastructure for worlds that weren't theirs, just the technical recommendation. Because to Commander Vasek, this was the job, not the exception, not the miracle, the job. 314 people, 2 directions through a mountain, 47 miners home by nightfall. The numbers told the story, they always did.